Good morning. It is Thursday, May the 27th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. First things first, I've written a companion book to go with this podcast, and it's entitled The Drill. And so buy The Drill. It's $2.99, and it gives you a better understanding of where I'm coming from, how I think, and help you understand the podcast a little bit better. Now, the best part of the book is the last 20 pages, which is filled with reading recommendations. So you should go and at the very least, get into, again, the Kindle store, and download samples of these books so that you can get an understanding of what they're about. And if you decide that this is something that you want to read at this time, then go ahead and, of course, buy those books. But again, my book, The Drill, is for sale on Kindle Publishing, $2.99, 81 pages long. Read it. Now, today I'm going to be reading the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. Then we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance, the Star-Spangled-Banner, and then I'm going to be reading Chapter 5 with comments of the book by one of the books by Vox-day. All that when I come back. Thank you. Let's see. Obey me rather than man. Obey God rather than man. Do not let sin reign in your mortal body, or obey it in its lusts. If you obey my voice and keep my covenant, I will be a special treasure to you. Turn to me when you are in distress. Turn to me and obey my voice. I will not forsake you or destroy you, nor will I forget the covenant that I swore to your fathers. Prayer declaration. I will earnestly obey your commandments to love you and serve you with all my heart and soul. I will observe and obey all your words, that it may go well with me and my children after me forever. I will walk after you and will fear you. I will keep your commandments and obey your voice. I will serve you and hold fast to you. And amen. And so now we're going to go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. So now, the Star-Spangled Banner. Thank you very much. Absolutely gorgeous. And I read the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, and I do the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner in part because nobody else does. Nobody else on the radio wants to do that. They claim to be conservative, they claim to be patriots, but they can't be bothered to do those three simple things. If you're monotheistic, if you're conservative, you're monotheistic, more than likely you're a Christian. So act like it. Say a prayer. Have an opening prayer and an ending prayer, at least an opening prayer. If you want to be always talking about the military and how brave our soldiers are, you want to kind of wear the mantle of patriotism. Again, act like it. Say the Pledge of Allegiance. Sing the Star-Spangled Banner. If you want to be a conservative, damn it, you got to act like one. It's not good enough to just be pimping about with your T-shirt that has some kind of a patriotic slogan on it, or your 3%er bullshit. You have to walk the talk. And so that's why I do the Pledge and the Star-Spangled Banner and the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. Also, to remind people that this is a war, and fundamentally the war is between God and Satan. Our enemies are essentially satanic, demonic. Those are our true enemies. They may use or borrow the forms of Maxine Waters and the Speaker of the House, but it is truly a war between God and Satan. The Pledge and the Star-Spangled Banner are done by children because, again, what's one of the most important things about being a conservative is having a sense of wonder, a little bit of innocence. Yes, we're all adults, but that doesn't mean we have to completely give up our innocence. We don't have to be like the left. Channel the left. That's the phrase I guess I'm looking for here. Where the left claims they know everything, they've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, they're jaded. And if you ever come across a conservative that it claims they're jaded all the time, they're not conservative. They're socialist. Period. So remember that you want to keep a sense of wonder about the world, a certain little bit of innocence. You haven't seen it all, you haven't done it all, none of us have. And that goes also to humility, having the humility to realize that we haven't said, done, or been everywhere. So, when I come back, I'm going to be reading from Chapter 5 from vox-day's book. Hold on. So vox-day, excellent author, and because he has depth. Most analysis is bad and wrong because it is shallow, and I'm referring to Hugh Hewitt and Sean Hannity. As a matter of fact, every so-called right-wing broadcaster on the radio, they're incredibly shallow, and because of it, they very often lose arguments that they should be winning. So one of the places to go if you want to get an understanding of depth of argument and how to argue make your arguments from a in-depth, then is vox-day. So this is Chapter 5, the SJW Social Justice Warrior Convergence Sequence. Another thing that you need to get out of the habit of, and that's making acronyms and abbreviations all the time. That's a lefty thing. We're not so tired that we can't say social justice warrior, that we have to say SJW. It's poor communications. It really is. Okay, Chapter 5. In his book, which is entitled SJWs Always Lie, I describe the conventional social justice warrior attack sequence. It's an 8-step routine that can be easily observed in most public social justice warrior attacks on individuals. And they all come from Rule 12 of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Rule 12, quote, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. And then in parentheses, this is cruel but very effective. Direct personalized criticism and ridicule works. Close parentheses. Yes, it does if you allow it to work. It's just as simple. They're going to go after things that you care about, your values, and the things that you claim to value. Newt Gingrich back in the 90s was Mr. Family Values. That was the theme of the Republican Party when they took over Congress in 1994, 1995. Family values. So they simply go out and try to point out and get the right to confess to being hypocrites. Okay? So they find out what you value, and then they try to use it against you. Oh, you use family values, but you've been divorced. And then demand that you explain to people how those two go together. How does divorce and family values work together? If you're shrewd, if you're a smart conservative, if you know what you're doing, know what you're talking about, you can destroy that little tactic in 6 seconds or less. But the vast majority, as a matter of fact, every other so-called conservative in the country is stupid. They don't know how to do it. I do. The 8 stages of the social justice warrior attack sequence are as follows. 1. Locate or create a violation of the narrative. 2. Point and shriek. 3. Isolate and swarm. 4. Reject and transform. 5. Press for surrender. 6. Appeal to amenable authority. 7. Show trial. 8. Victory parade. Couple of keys here. Number 1 is the victory parade. Always claim your victory. Because if you don't, then you're leaving yourself in a psychological limbo. And if there's no psychological payoff to what it is that you're doing, there's no reason to do it. And eventually you're going to quit standing up for what it is you believe. The other thing is locate or create a violation of the narrative. The left pretends not to believe in reality. So if there's no reality, what is there? The narrative. Back to the book. In like manner, the convergence of institutions tends to follow a recognizable pattern that operates in much the same way as the social justice warrior attack sequence, but on a larger scale. Regardless of the nature of the institution, the same general pattern of behavior is reliably followed to such an extent that it is relatively easy to identify how badly an institution is converged and its resultant ability or inability to perform its primary purpose on the basis of what stage in the convergence sequence has been reached by the social justice warriors converging it. For example, when I read the bizarre story of a sudden decline of a once popular church near my childhood home in Minnesota being reduced to 800 people meeting in a hotel, I knew, without even needing to ask anyone, what had happened. Founded in 1946, the church was a fixture in the northern suburbs of St. Paul with 2 locations offering 7 worship services to 7,000 parishioners. Pastor V was a genuine man of God who initially appeared a little weak and bumbling in person, but grew in stature in the pulpit, preaching straight from the Bible with a powerful evangelical fervor that belied his traditional white robes and otherwise unprepossessing demeanor. It was arguably even more remarkable that within just 18 months, attendance had fallen nearly 80%. Over half the staff was laid off, both total and per capita giving drastically declined, and the original location was shut down in part due to, quote, a lack of elevator access for the disabled, unquote. What could possibly motivate a pastor, even a female one, to destroy her own church in this manner? On March 13, 2016, less than 2 years after she had been appointed, interim senior pastor Mindy Bach presided over the final service at North Heights Lutheran in front of the last 900 members of the congregation. And let's see. I'll skip that for a second. The convergence, decline, and fall of North Heights Lutheran is indeed a cautionary tale. And then we go to the organizational convergence sequence. This is a sequence that Mr. Day is claiming is the way that corporations are taken over. And it's fascinating because one of the most fascinating parts about this is that he is saying that it's usually people that start this convergence process are the ones that you would least think would be doing so. They're the meek, unassuming folks that come in and usually are filling a fairly minor role and eventually end up leading some sort of a movement within the company. Stage 1, infiltration. And the infiltration stage usually begins when an institution is at its peak. Social justice warriors are particularly drawn to human resources in the corporate world and community management in the open source world because these organizational roles tend to combine the two things social justice warriors seek most: power over others and an absence of personal responsibility. Don't expect social justice warrior infiltrators to be blue-haired, frothing mad, genderqueer activists with thick-framed eyeglasses. Sometimes the infiltration is incidental. Social justice warriors need jobs just like everyone else, after all, and they're more than willing to exploit the well-known tendency of the average white employer to want to score affirmative action points or pick up a get-out-of-sexism free card by hiring a woman. A couple of things. First of all, I like he calls it a get-out-of-sexism free card, but there's no such race as white. Let us all conservatives disabuse ourselves of that notion. There's no such race as white. It just doesn't exist. Okay, so now, have you ever noticed that in recent U.S. presidential election cycles, in the early stages of the campaign for the Republican nomination, a woefully unqualified and unlikely candidate whom no one has ever heard of not only announces that he's running for president as a Republican, but also does inexplicably well in the early caucuses and primaries. He goes on to cite Ben Carson and others, and then saying how Republicans initially get all fired up over having a minority candidate running for office. Of course, these Republicans are motivated by nothing more than the desire to signal their virtue and obtain a get-out-of-racism free card. Again, another phrase I like. After all, how can you accuse someone of being racist when he voted for a black man for president? And yet, the left does. Okay, no matter what you do to try to prove you're not a racist, as a matter of fact, the more you try to prove you're not a racist, the more racist you look. That's the psychology of it. Okay, the more you try to prove something, the more you try to prove a negative, the more you're going to affirm its opposite. That's all there is to it. That's why you get that queasy little feeling when you're getting involved in arguments with the left where you think, I know I'm right, why do I feel like I'm losing the argument? And at some point, you start to even question your sanity. It's because you're trying to prove a negative. You need to stop, and you need to turn that around and make them prove a positive. Affirmative action? Why? Single payer? Why? Reparations? Why? See, you then put yourself in the position of being open-minded instead of reflexively opposing something just because it comes from a lefty or somebody that sounds like a lefty. You're open-minded. Why? We both know that they're not going to be able to answer that question. We know that they're not even going to try to answer that question. That's not why they became lefties. They became lefties for a sense of power because they can manipulate other people to do what it is that they want done. Let's see. The same desire to virtue signal, to morally parade one's social self-righteousness, is also observable in corporate America. While there are a whole host of intellectual justifications that have been invented over the years to justify the various forms of affirmative action, indeed there are entire fields of study now devoted to manufacturing new justifications for the preferential treatment of minorities and searching for evidence to continue appealing to the old reasons, they are not relevant to our purpose of understanding the infiltration stage. Stage 2, reinforcement. I got a strange message on Twitter. Someone at GitHub wanted to talk to me. Basically, they wanted to offer him a job, and at first he was reluctant, but he eventually went ahead and hired on with GitHub. My contact at GitHub insisted the company was transforming itself. Let me see what these thoughts. Oh, there it is. He agreed to an interview, and he had blah blah blah. And he ended up. Oh, he said on a team. They were hiring for a team, so he ended up. His team was 5 women and 1 man. 2 of us trans, 3 women of color. As we described in his book, SJWs Always Lie, social justice warriors naturally gravitate to human resources for 2 reasons. Once securely in place in human resources, the social justice warriors' first priority is to hire more social justice warriors in human resources. First, in order to provide protective cover to the original social justice warrior, and second, to help establish a unit narrative that can begin influencing the corporation as a whole. Once an HR unit is converged, it will begin to regularly transmit propaganda about itself and its activities to the company at large, especially to the executives. Before long, they are informing everyone that it is Frida Kahlo's birthday, and if you want to learn more about this great Mexican painter, be sure to sign up for the trip to the local museum next month in time to take advantage of our corporate discount. And gradually the tone darkens, the exclamation points disappear, and in place of birthdays and company picnics, dire Orwellian warnings are issued about behaviors deemed inappropriate, and the outings are transformed into mandatory workshops and seminars. All the while, they're busily interfering with the attempts of managers to hire productive employees by establishing new corporate policies about job requirements that permit them to weed out anyone who lacks the desired gender studies degree or activist profile, no matter the nature of the nominal job is supposed to be. Over time, the social justice warriors and human resources will transform the corporate culture and make it into a thought police state that is more to their liking. Stage 3, seize the high ground. Twitter Trust and Safety Council provides input on our safety products, policies, and programs. Twitter works with safety advocates, academics, researchers, grassroots, etc., working to prevent abuse. In corporations and organizations, the high ground is defined as those groups capable of influencing decisions related to hiring, firing, discipline, and compensation. The only figments of the imagination of racist, bigoted, sexist, and outdated white male executives, since the social justice warrior can certainly cite no shortage of references and studies to prove that diversity always makes a company stronger, inclusivity always makes a company more productive, and more equality makes a company more profitable, for reasons that are utterly incomprehensible even when they are coherent. Groups like the Trust and Safety Council at Twitter and programs such as Google's Diversity Corps and Intel's Global Diversity and Inclusion are designed to disrupt the status quo and cement social justice warrior control of the corporation. Stage 4, push for inclusivity. If you think about the growth of women's studies, black studies, and other forms of special studies that are now offered as majors at most American universities, you should be able to recognize the sort of make-work job that social justice warriors always attempt to create for themselves in lieu of doing anything productive or quantifiable. Despite the fact that they provide no functional basis for employment at all, the number of women's and gender study degrees has grown by 300% since 1990. Stage 5, target the dissidents. Let's see, what is this? The two primary weapons utilized by corporate SJWs or social justice warriors to marginalize opponents of conversion are the now ubiquitous Code of Conduct and the Community Committee. While codes of conduct sound sensible enough in theory, in practice they are very vaguely worded documents that serve much the same purpose for the community committees responsible for enforcing them that petty traffic laws do for the police. Now, one of the things that I want to say is that these are psychological things. The whole idea here is to create, like he says, a sense of authority within the company that's outside the normal chain of command. Okay, so your community committee. And so if you're called before the community committee, you're supposed to have a certain psychological mindset. And a psychological mindset is that you're going to go in there and you're going to act and react subserviently. You can defeat the community committee by refusing to act in a subservient manner. You come in there and act as though you are no worse than they are. Okay, you demand proof, you act in a reasonable, rational manner, question things that deserve to be questioned, refuse to go along with the program just because it happens to be their program. But that's what they're counting on you. It's a psychological game. Somebody in authority calls you into their office. You're what? You're nervous. My boss is calling me into the office, and so I wonder what he wants. You start going through all the things that you've been doing. Did I do something wrong? Did blah, blah, blah. And the community committee is going to have the same psychological effect. You're going to go in, your mouth is dry, you're nervous, blah, 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 blah. And they're going to act like an authority, and they're going to expect you to act like a subordinate. And you don't have to. Let me see, what is the code of conduct. So that's another one where it's supposed to be an authority, and you can use it, though, as a guideline rather than an authority. And the community committee, I suppose, would use the code of conduct to try to establish its authority. But again, it's a psychological game. Most of power, violence isn't, and threats of violence aren't, but power, properly understood, is psychological in nature. It's a feeling. I'm powerful because I feel powerful. In practice, codes of conduct are also used to smoke out and identify opposition, as the initial skeptics who are most able to understand the danger posed by a proposed code of conduct will usually tend to serve as the nexus of the resistance against it. Stage 6, expel the infidels. While the nebulous code of conduct rules sometimes prove too nebulous to actually make any charges stick well enough to justify expulsion, the very Kafkaesque nature of the process is usually sufficient to demoralize the dissidents and push them into quitting. After all, how does one defend oneself against a code of conduct violation which is comprised of arguing that there are downsides to the code of conduct? And again, it's another psychological game. Once you find psychological games can be defeated, okay? Because they're imaginary. Okay, so if they can imagine one thing, I can imagine something else. Okay, once you know that, then you can defeat their games. And it's another, I've said it before in my podcast, don't quit. I mean, unless you're looking at a situation where you have a better job offer, somebody's offered you a better job, better location, better money, whatever, don't quit. Don't get into a situation like this where you feel demoralized and I better quit because this company really, don't do that. You don't have to. It's not necessary. Okay, stick with it. Of course, quitting is always a mistake, see? However, one tries to justify it to oneself. Stage 7, milk the cow. Let's see here. The basic problem with social justice warrior convergence should be relatively obvious. How does an organization survive when it has successfully expelled the larger part of its most productive employees and replaced the company's business priorities with expensive, unprofitable social justice objectives? And all of this reminds me of a guy in Germany. He runs Red Bull. He's the CEO of Red Bull. And he hired people to be diversity and inclusion people, put them in as, think vice presidents. And within a year, he fired them all because he realized that these were people that were not interested in the company's goals and making the company larger, more productive, and a better value for its shareholders. That they were about the exact opposite. They were about destroying the company from within. Even though they didn't think of themselves that way, that's in effect the results of all of their inclusivity and diversity stuff. So he just got rid of the whole department, basically his whole inclusivity and diversity department, and fired all of the people in it. So good for him. Let's see. Social justice warriors have no idea how to make money beyond convincing people to give it to them. And if you want a reference on that one, look at BLM. Take YouTube, which is the most social justice warrior converged Google-owned corporation. They will demonetize literally any video at the drop of a hat, in part because that means YouTube gets to keep all the money it produces from advertisers, but also because their social justice warriors are so sensitive that they can detect one part of a narrative questioning in a million. YouTube demonetizes about 1% of their videos on an ongoing basis. Contrast this with Blogger, which is also Google-owned, but is so chill about content that it has suspended precisely 2 of my 20,136 blog posts in 14 years, both times for DMCA-related claims, one of which was false, which amounts to a percentage that is so low I can't even read the number on my calculator, but it's a lot less than 1%. And as I mentioned previously, YouTube did not hesitate to crack down on their most popular YouTuber, PewDiePie. Why would they behave in such an obviously counterproductive manner? Because they don't have to make money. YouTube loses $2 billion per year. The fact that most open source contributors are unpaid and that the projects don't need to make any money in order to accomplish their objectives is the primary reason that open source has been so rapidly converged in comparison with for-profit corporations. It is also why the absolute breeding ground for social justice warriors is in the not-for-profit organizations. Social justice is not profitable, but advocating for social justice most certainly can be. Stage 8, evade the blame. Given what the reader now knows about social justice warriors, I doubt it will come as any great surprise to discover that the employment of Coraline Etta Emke, the individual perhaps most responsible for the convergence of open source community due to automating the addition of what should have rightly been known as the Convergence Covenant to open source projects, did not end well. The most amusing aspect of Emke's firing is the way in which GitHub apparently did everything short of muzzling Coraline and strapping Zim into the redundant restraints to which serial killer Garland Green was subjected in Con Air, just to get Emke safely out the door without destroying their entire code base or triggering the core reactor into a meltdown. Many corporations, churches, charities, institutions, open source projects, and other organizations now find themselves caught up in the organizational convergence sequence, and in many cases, much further along than the sane members of their organization would like. No story is truly over, but those who find themselves caught in the throes of despair may find encouragement to know that the next chapter in the story of the fatally converged Lutheran Church has begun. Let me see what we got here. So we'll go ahead and read this. About a year after North Heights Lutheran Church briefly closed its door due to financial issues and disagreements, the church has completely paid off its mortgage, hired a new senior pastor, and believes it will bring continuing unity. One of the things that we feel is the future will be greater than the past, says Reverend Morris. Reverend Morris V., I can't pronounce his last name, of Shoreview, who was a senior pastor from 61 to 99. Pastor V described what the church went through in recent years in biblical terms. We had to go through a crucifixion, the death of the old, in order to receive the new. There can be no resurrection without crucifixion. 1 year later, buried church rises from tomb of debt. Shoreview Press. So, and that brings us to chapter 6. Which I may or may not decide to cover at a later time, and I'll back in a minute. Thank you. One of the things that about this book, the whole point of it is it does point, how these companies get converged and go and end up becoming like Coca-Cola. But you got to realize, as an individual, you have power. You have power inside the company. You got power outside the company. Outside the company, if you're going in to sit down for an interview with a supervisor at Coca-Cola, one of the things that you want to do is start asking, do you have various types of committees that enforce standards here? Do you have a code of conduct? Do you are you involved in training classes for people of specific races? Okay, and so as you get the answers to those kinds of questions, then if you decide, which you probably should, decide not to work for, say, Coca-Cola, make sure you let them know. Either verbally or, even better, in writing. No, I'm not interested in this position. Please remove my application. And I refuse to work for a company that is more interested in politics or sociology than it is in its primary mission, something to that effect, so that it drives it home. The company gets to realize we're losing out on good, productive people because of social justice warriors, and make them choose. Are we going to drag the company down all the way down and bankrupt this company just so we can, because we're going to give in to our fear? Because really, that's what this is all about. at Coca-Cola and elsewhere. These are not people. The excuse made for these folks is usually that they are virtue signaling, but they're not. Or you can say it's an incomplete explanation. They're virtue signaling, fine, but why? Because they're scared. They don't know how to deal with arbitrary allegations, because that's what's coming next. If they don't submit, then they know the arbitrary allegations are coming, and they don't know how to answer that. So, so then the other way is, if you're inside the company, you still have power. You don't. If something changes are made, and you get all of a sudden a code of conduct, you are made aware of some central committee that is going to be some kind of an unofficial, I guess. I don't know what the hell how you would give any authority to any type of a committee. But if you're made aware of that committee, don't automatically assume it has any authority. Don't assume that. And if you're called before this committee, you can sit down in front of them, and the first thing you do is question their authority. Where the hell do you get any authority? Of course, you might not want to use the word hell because it's not necessary, but say, excuse me, but where's your authority? Where's the authority for a code of conduct? And so challenge it. Don't just go in there. Psychologically, it's easy to be intimidated. Somebody in the company says, especially if it's signed off by a vice president or the CEO, you get a letter from them saying, guess what? We have a committee now that's going to deal with various types of issues, and so it's easy to feel intimidated. Don't. So question the authority anyways. Make these people validate themselves, and you take a lot of the steam out of the wind out of their sails, so to speak. So that's one of the ways that you can still be effective as an individual in a corporation. And also the other thing is to do the best you can to deal yourself some cards. It's going to be hard once you're already an employee, but do what you can. When the committee wants to see you, ask them, can I bring a witness? That's an excellent tactic, by the way. Then that makes them feel nervous. They don't want witnesses. Can I record it? Can I verbally, do audio or video recordings? If they say no to those, then you come out and ask why. Why is it that that's not permitted? So if you're in a position as an employee and people are asking, are suggesting, you got other coworkers that are saying, hey, it'd be great to have a new committee that deals with various types of, say, diversity issues. Don't oppose it reflexively. You simply ask why. The burden of proof is always on the left, always. They're the ones that want change. Anybody that wants change, right, left, or center, has the burden of proof. And what that means is that the left always has the burden of proof because they always want change. They're running around asking, why not, why not, why not? And so prove it. That should be your motto. It takes all the pressure off of you. It puts pressure on the left where it belongs, and you simply demand proof, and proof to your standards. They show you documents, and they show you statistics, and they do this. Ask them, what does this prove? What does this prove? And so this way, they end up worn out. They end up questioning their sanity instead of you ending up frustrated and questioning your own sanity. Back in a minute. Thank you. So on the idea of questioning things and the idea of why not, the difference between socialism and capitalism is the difference between two words. One is why not, which is with the left's motto, why not this, why not that, why not the other, and the conservatives' motto, which is why. Why? Why should we? Why should I change? Why should I do things differently? Why? But the problem is that most conservatives don't know that. I'm the only one in the United States of America that does know that. That's why I don't get involved in the traps that other conservatives get involved in. That's why I'm still able to make a difference in my own life. I don't feel, I can walk out my door and I'm confident that I can deal with anything that the left wants to throw at me. And that's the goal here, is to get people to understand, know what it means to be a true conservative, because being a true conservative means you are confident. There's nothing the left can throw at you anywhere, whether it's work or church or anywhere else, that you can't defeat. But in regards to money, there's Bitcoin and Schlitcoin and Boitcoin and all that other crap. And it's typical lefty bullshit. I don't get involved in any of that stuff because there's a rule in investing, and the rule is never invest your money in something you don't understand. And I have no clue about Bitcoin or any of the other coins. There was a guy on the radio, though. He was being interviewed, and the interviewer was very impressed with this guy. He had written books, and he's supposed to be really some big tech muckety muck. And so he was all about Bitcoins and how Bitcoin is the way of the future. Gold is not going to be it's going to be no good, and silver's no good. The dollar is definitely no good. So the way to go is definitely Bitcoin. But the interviewer was not doing us any favors because he didn't ask one simple question: why? Why? Why do we need Bitcoin? Who asked you? Who asked you to produce Bitcoin? But anyways, one of the places where this guy being interviewed gave himself up is he said that he asked the question, why not? Why not X? And that's the way the lefties always start. They don't ask why. They ask why not? Why not do things differently? And so then the job after that is a sales job. Being able to sell people on the idea that this new change is necessary, and when in fact it really isn't. Look at Uber. Uber and Lyft, they barely exist, and they barely exist because they're overreactions. My thinking every time I hear their name is, who asked you? You had a couple of guys that started Uber because they had a hard time getting a taxi when they were in Germany, right? And so that's where they got the idea of not just adjusting or making some adjustments, creating a new taxi company that would be more responsive to the customer. No. They have to revolutionize the taxi industry. And so that's what they're in the business of doing. And the only way they're really going to be able to do that, by the way, is when they get autonomous cars. When they have cars that have no drivers, because then they don't have to worry about all the issues of employment and whatnot. Until then, they get to continue being a fraud, pretending to have independent contractors, yet monitoring them as though they were employees. So they're going to continue to get to have it both ways. And the solution to that problem, by the way, is easy. It's called having insurance and being bonded. You make it a requirement. All the drivers have to be bonded, and if anything goes wrong, then the company goes to their bonding company, and if the bonding company then drops them, then they're out of a job. That's the simplest way to deal with contractors. If you have a contractor that comes to renovate your house, you make sure they have a bonding company. Okay, because if they do damage in the process of doing your house, you go to the bonding company and file a claim. And again, if the bonding company people filed too many claims with the bonding company's going to drop them, and they're not going to be able to get any more work. But anyways, that's like I said, an aside. But the point is, you can always tell the lefties from that why not attitude. Why not? And the question is always, from a conservative standpoint, a realistic standpoint, is why? Why change? Why do things differently? You want single payer? Why? Why is that better than what we have now? Okay. And but only 10% or there's 10 million people don't have insurance. So what? Make them prove it all the way. Okay. But when you're asking the questions, you're the person then that looks open-minded. Okay, if they get frustrated and they get mad, well, you're just doing this, you tell them you're dogmatic. You don't have an open mind. So, goodbye. Punish them with that one. Anyways, until next time, thanks for listening. Hit the like button, subscribe, please, and buy the book, the companion book to this podcast called The Drill, that is available for sale for $2.99 on Kindle Direct Publishing, or actually it's in the Kindle bookstore, and get a better idea. Also, with this book it's a first edition. I'm working on the second edition, which will be out within 6 months, so November timeframe. And it'll be more thorough, more detailed version of the book. So until then, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.